The first time I saw this picture, the caption read, "This is what depression looks like." And until that moment, I'd never seen anything more haunting. However, I'd like the original creator to permit me to tweak it a bit and say, this is what mental illness looks like. Mental illness doesn't always look like what we grew up watching in films. You know, the ones where the wicked wife decides to poison the husband and somehow she misfires and the juju backfires. It doesn't always look like that. We often miss it because we're deeply religious people, and our perspectives and understanding of issues and events are largely rooted in religious beliefs of right and wrong, good and evil, sin and punishment, goodness and reward. We think in absolutes. It isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it might not always be a good way to look at life. We are a people who pray and wish every untoward thing away, thinking if it happens to you, you have offended a higher power. Not necessarily. Our culture and traditions further reinforce these belief systems, making us believe that life is fair, just, and as long as you live a life of goodness, bad things only happen to bad people. Ha ha. Trust me, bad things happen to good people too. Even then, our understanding of what constitutes evil is somewhat rooted in religious and cultural beliefs. So that many a time we come across a people who lack empathy, support, and humanity. It's not our fault. Unfortunately, we have become conditioned over time and over generations and accepted this as the norm. The same culture and tradition has made it possible for us to provide support to those who are in mourning. We cook, we gather round, and we empathize. Why can't we do the same for mental health? Culture and traditions have shaped how we view the issues of mental health in our communities. In a country where 3 out of 10 people suffer from a mental illness, the stigma, which has become associated with mental health issues, and the hushed tones of conversations paint a very distressing picture. We are not providing enough and adequate support for the mentally ill. Ignorance can no longer be an excuse. Contrary to what we've been conditioned to believe, being mentally ill is not the result of witchcraft. Neither is it the emotional weakness of the person affected. Mental illness, whether they be mood disorders, anxiety disorders, eating disorders, trauma-related disorders, personality disorders, old age-related disorders, or substance abuse disorders, are not brought upon us as a form of spiritual attack or punishment for sins committed. Neither are they recompense for a life of immorality or decadence. The films we watched as kids, they lied. I spoke to a good friend of mine recently, and she shared her story with me. She also gave me permission to share some parts of her story with you. When she told me she had lived with bipolar disorder for many years and opened up about her struggles, the sad and painful realization hit me. My friend isn't under some form of spell or curse. My friend is really, really sick. But somehow, we aren't all clamoring around her because she doesn't have a mainstream disease. She said to me, I'd like for you to give me permission to read it, and this is what she says. Living with mental illness can be very challenging, overwhelming, because I'm not dealing with just the mental aspects. I also experience physical symptoms like constant pain, nausea, fatigue, and headaches. For me, the most frustrating part is that all the people that love you can't and don't understand what you're going through. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is the social stigma and the bad rap that bipolar has. Everyone pretty much thinks I'm a crazy person who's prone to violence because people do not understand my condition and do not have the patience for it. They've tagged me as arrogant, too intense, overly emotional, and they keep asking me to snap out of it. How do I snap out of an illness? They wouldn't tell me to snap out of cancer or malaria, would they? No, I don't think so. You can't say that to a physically sick person. You wouldn't. And if you've ever had to deal with someone who's ever suffered this, I'm sure you've heard that word or the phrase, snap out of it. We all have. So in spite of the sad fact that I failed my friend, for which I am deeply sorry, and I apologize, I had to think of what I could do. I should know. I have suffered from depression. So I asked myself, what do I want? What would have helped me? What could have helped me be better? I believe there's a lot more that must be done by us individuals to educate ourselves on mental health issues and to learn how we can offer real support and empathy to those suffering from mental illnesses in a way that actually does help them, in a way that shows them there is no shame in being sick, like every sick person. And because you're a sick person, you must go to a doctor, you must seek professional help, and you must get love and compassion. We shouldn't stop with our sick friends. I don't think so. We must replicate this learning and make it the norm in our workplaces, our families, our places of worship, and our schools. We all have phones, don't we? We must leverage the technological tools at our disposal to disabuse our minds of the false belief about mental health and amplify the message that there is no stigma attached to mental illness and there is no need to feel ashamed or awkward when talking about it. It don't decrease. That's what we like to see. I know mine decrease. It's all jokes. I also had a chat with a really good friend of mine who sent me a few notes and concerns on the topic, stating that mental health has been widely neglected by Africa, and it's obvious in the absence of treatment as compared to the proportion of people with mental illness. It is widely said that depression is not an African disease. I'm sure you've all heard that before. I know if you decrease, nah, I don't suffer depression, I'm too happy for that. That's okay. But I guess with the hierarchy of needs, I kind of get that. Because first you need your basic needs, and then you move to the other. But if I've gotten my basic needs, I think I can start thinking about my psychological needs before I move to the top. But I get it. So small wonder Africa doesn't have a name, a word for the term depression. Or do we? Does anyone know? Rather, we want to chastise someone, like I said, and say, you decrease. A normal phrase for non-conformity or bad behavior. Bad is bad. Decrease. We must free our minds from the belief that depression, a mood-related disorder, is a ruse employed by the weak to be lazy or unproductive. A recent study by Joy Inc. and NOI polls states that 60 million Nigerians are estimated to be at risk of suffering from depression and anxiety disorders. So you, and you right there, you just might be sitting close to someone who's suffering from depression, but we don't have a safe place to address it. That colleague or friend of yours at the office, your follower on social media, could be driven to suicide in a society where mental illness is seen as weakness or sheer madness. But I'm not saying that if you're depressed or have been depressed, that you will commit suicide. But a study also shows that 2/3 of the people who commit suicide have been depressed in their immediate past. So, mental illness is linked to loss of productivity. And a UN report states that an estimated 264 million people suffer from depression and anxiety disorders, costing the global economy $1 trillion each year in lost productivity. Let's bring this back home. Judging from our problems, poverty, hopelessness, unemployment, and insecurity, it might help us to start to ask questions. Why, despite our population and the youthfulness of it, our productivity as a nation is lower compared to others who have lower populations and resources. When we increase our literacy on mental health, about depression and other disorders, we will make it easier for the affected to seek help, facilitate support, aid will be given to them. We will reduce the delay between the first appearance, the signs, and the symptoms, and seeking help from a professional. Ultimately, since we all like money so much, we will save lives on one hand, and we will save money on the other. Our orientation about mental health must change from one of fear and disdain to that of solutions, love, and empathy. We must, I think, become forward-thinking about mental health and see it as an opportunity to educate, support, and rebuild. The same way you don't want to bleach. Your skin, it's important. Up here is really important. You have to take a stand on mental health issues. It will allow us to realign, rebuild ourselves and others. I am not ashamed. Do not be ashamed or afraid to share your feelings with a loved one, with a stranger. Be that ear. Listen. Seek the signs. We will have that which we need to spring out of a feeling of hopelessness and dejection and on to greatness. Thank you.